You are looking at a blood-soaked siege line in the ancient Near East. The year is roughly 990 BCE. You are standing outside the heavily fortified walls of Rabbah, the capital city of the Ammonites. The air smells of bronze armor, sweat, and rotting casualties of war. Before you lies the body of an elite foreign mercenary. His name is Uriah the Hittite. He has just been struck down by enemy archers shooting from the top of the city wall. To the casual observer, this is simply the tragic cost of ancient warfare. Men die in siege assaults every single day. This is the sanitized Sunday school version you were likely told as a child. You probably heard it was a simple story about a king who fell in love from a rooftop and made a tragic moral error. That version cleans up a calculated, cold-blooded crime scene. When you strip away the stained glass rhetoric, you are left with a state-sponsored military execution. You are investigating a murder orchestrated by the highest authority in the Kingdom of Israel. Why was this seasoned warrior ordered to abandon standard military doctrine and charge directly into a lethal kill zone? Who benefits when an elite soldier dies suddenly on the front lines? To understand this crime, you have to reconstruct the chain of custody of a top-secret royal dispatch. You must examine the motives, the means, and the cover-up of a royal conspiracy that almost stayed buried in the desert sands. Let us step inside the crime scene. Your investigation begins not on the battlefield, but in the royal palace of Jerusalem several weeks earlier. You are examining the victim's background to understand why he became a target. Uriah was not just an average infantryman drafted from a local countryside. According to the ancient military registries preserved in the book of Samuel, Uriah was one of the 30. This was an ultra-elite special forces unit, sworn to protect King David with their lives. His Hittite heritage means he descended from the formidable martial culture of Anatolia. He was a professional warrior who lived by a rigorous code of military honor and ritual purity. While Uriah was risking his life besieging Rabbah, his commander-in-chief was pacing the flat roof of the royal palace. From that vantage point, the king observed Uriah's wife Bathsheba bathing. What follows is an abuse of absolute royal power. Bathsheba is brought to the palace, and soon after, a secret message arrives at the royal chambers. She is pregnant. Suddenly, King David is facing a catastrophic political and legal crisis. In the ancient Near Eastern legal framework, adultery was not merely a personal sin. Under both Mosaic law and surrounding legal traditions like the Code of Hammurabi, adultery was a capital offense. If the pregnancy is discovered while the husband is away at war, the scandal could shatter the credibility of the monarchy. The king needs an alibi, and he needs it immediately. You are now tracking the first attempted cover-up, the psychological manipulation of the victim. An urgent dispatch is sent to the front lines, ordering General Joab to send Uriah back to Jerusalem. When Uriah arrives, the king debriefs him with mundane questions about the war. Then comes the directive. Go down to your house and wash your feet. In ancient Hebrew idiom, this was an unmistakable invitation to enjoy the comforts of his wife. If Uriah sleeps with Bathsheba tonight, the child's paternity is safely obscured. The crime is erased before it ever registers. But the perpetrator made a critical miscalculation. He underestimated the profound martial honor of his victim. Uriah refuses to step foot inside his home. Instead, he sleeps at the entrance of the palace alongside the royal guards. When questioned by the king the next morning, Uriah delivers a chilling indictment of royal privilege. He states that the Ark of the Covenant, Israel, and Judah are staying in temporary shelters. He points out that his commander Joab and his fellow soldiers are camping in the open fields. How could he possibly go home to eat, drink, and sleep with his wife while his brothers in arms face death? The statement is preserved in ancient court records as a masterpiece of unintentional irony. The pagan mercenary displays more loyalty to the God of Israel and the royal army than the anointed king himself. You are now witnessing the escalation from attempted cover-up to premeditated murder. David tries one final, non-lethal intervention the following night. He invites Uriah to a royal banquet and intentionally gets him intoxicated. The hypothesis is simple. Alcohol will lower the soldier's moral inhibitions and drive him to his wife's bed. Even stumbling drunk, Uriah's muscle memory of military discipline holds fast. He collapses on his mat among the king's servants and never goes home. The alibi strategy has completely failed. The king is out of time, and Uriah knows too much by simply existing. The next morning, you observe the creation of one of the most sinister documents in recorded military history. David writes a letter to General Joab, seals it with his personal royal signet ring, and hands it to Uriah. You are watching a loyal soldier march back to the front lines, carrying his own death warrant. Let us examine the forensic evidence of this letter, which scholars call the Uriah Letter. The text of the order is direct, brutal, and devoid of any tactical justification. It commands Joab to put Uriah out in front, where the fighting is fiercest. Then, the general is ordered to withdraw support, so that Uriah will be struck down and die. This is not a lawful military order. This is an assassination directive, utilizing enemy combatants as the murder weapon. Why use the Ammonite army instead of a domestic royal assassin? Plausible deniability. If a royal assassin slips a blade into Uriah in Jerusalem, rumors spread, and whispers of conspiracy threaten the throne. If Uriah dies charging a city wall, he dies a hero's death. The king gets rid of his liability, acquires a grieving widow, and looks generous by adopting her into the royal harem. You must now shift your investigation to the tactical execution of the murder at the walls of Rabbah. General Joab receives the sealed dispatch and reads the king's fatal command. Joab is a hardened, ruthless pragmatist who has survived decades of political intrigue. He knows this order violates every basic rule of siege warfare. Why would an experienced general agree to execute such a tactically absurd maneuver? To answer this, we must look at the historical dynamics of the Davidic court, analyzed by modern biblical historians. Scholars like Dr. Baruch Halpern, author of David's Secret Demons, emphasize that Joab and David were locked in a constant struggle for power. By executing this dirty deed, Joab gains ultimate leverage over the crown. He becomes the co-conspirator in a state secret that could destroy the king. Joab does not follow David's instructions to the exact letter, because an obvious withdrawal would trigger mutiny among the ranks. Instead, Joab modifies the plan to make it look like a tragic tactical error. He assigns Uriah to a sector of the battlefield where he knows the Ammonites have deployed their most lethal shock troops. He orders an aggressive assault directly against the fortified city gates. You are standing in the dirt as the Israelite unit charges forward. The defenders on the wall of Rabbah unleash a devastating barrage of arrows, stones, and masonry. It is a slaughter. Several elite soldiers of the royal guard are killed instantly in the kill zone. Among the fallen, bleeding out in the dust of a foreign land, is Uriah the Hittite. The murder weapon was an Ammonite arrow, but the hand that pulled the bowstring was guided from Jerusalem. Now examine the aftermath and the official military cover-up. Joab drafts a battlefield report to send back to the king in Jerusalem. He instructs the messenger on exactly how to play the scene before the throne. Joab anticipates that King David might feign anger at the high casualty rate to maintain his public persona. The general tells the messenger, "If the king asks why you went so close to the wall, knowing they would shoot from above, deliver the code phrase." That historical code phrase references a famous military blunder from the Book of Judges. Joab tells the messenger to remind the king of how Abimelech was killed at Thebez when a woman dropped a millstone on him from a wall. Then the messenger is instructed to add the payload. "Your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also." You watch the messenger arrive in Jerusalem and deliver the report. The king does not rage, nor does he order an investigation into the tactical failure that cost the lives of his elite soldiers. Instead, David sends back a cold, chillingly pragmatic reply to appease his general. He tells Joab not to let this matter upset him, claiming that the sword devours one as well as another. He orders Joab to press the attack against the city and destroy it. Case closed. The official narrative is recorded in the royal annals as a routine casualty of the Ammonite campaign. After the traditional period of mourning, Bathsheba is quietly moved into the palace and becomes David's wife. The conspiracy appears to be an absolute success. No forensic investigators exist in the 10th century BCE to test for blood spatter or trace the seal on the fatal letter. But ancient true crime leaves a different kind of evidence: textual and political fallout. How do we know the details of this secret conspiracy? if it was executed with such absolute operational security. This brings us to the most remarkable piece of evidence in your investigation: the preservation of the crime in the court history itself. Ancient Near Eastern royal inscriptions from Babylon, Assyria, and Egypt are notoriously propaganda-driven. Pharaohs and Mesopotamian kings never recorded their own murders, adulteries, or military blunders on public monuments. Yet the Hebrew Bible preserves the entire, uncensored forensic transcript of this royal assassination. Historians like Dr. P. Kyle McCarter, in his seminal commentary on 2 Samuel in the Anchor Yale Bible series, point out that the inclusion of this narrative is extraordinary. It suggests the existence of an independent prophetic and legal tradition in ancient Israel that held even the monarch accountable to a higher law. That accountability arrives in the person of Nathan, the prophet. You are stepping back into the royal throne room several months later. Nathan does not accuse the king directly. Instead, he uses a brilliant psychological interrogation technique: the parable of the rich man and the poor man's ewe lamb. When David angrily declares that the rich man who stole the lamb deserves to die, Nathan delivers the devastating four-word verdict: "You are the man." The cover-up is shattered in an instant. Nathan exposes the secret assassination to the entire royal court, connecting the bloodshed at Rabbah directly to the crown. The forensic reconstruction of this crime reveals the terrifying vulnerability of justice when absolute power controls the military apparatus. Uriah did not die because he was a threat to the state. He died because his unwavering moral integrity was an inconvenience to a ruler who had abandoned his own. The assassination of Uriah the Hittite remains one of history's clearest demonstrations of how institutions can be weaponized to cover up personal deviance. When you look back at that blood-soaked siege line in ancient Moab, you no longer see a simple Sunday school story. You see a calculated, state-sponsored military execution. You are looking at a blood-soaked siege line in the ancient Near East.